Step into a world where power, family, and reputation mattered more than love or feelings. In ancient Rome, marriage wasn't about two people falling in love. It was more like a deal, a serious agreement between families to gain political power, social respect, and influence. For Romans, a wedding wasn't the start of a love story. It was more like signing a contract. And in that contract, romance wasn't the main focus. In fact, loyalty in the romantic sense wasn't really expected. Roman husbands were not only allowed to have affairs, people thought it was normal. It was common for men to have other relationships outside of marriage. These could be short flings or long-term affairs, and most people didn't see it as a scandal. Many of these affairs were with courtesans, women known for their beauty, intelligence, and charm. They weren't meant for marriage, but no one was shocked when men spent time with them. But here is something even more surprising. Men in ancient Rome also had relationships with other men. This wasn't hidden or shameful. It was seen as a normal part of life. There were no strict labels like gay or straight. Instead, Romans judged relationships by power roles, not by who you loved. What mattered most was who had the power. In most man and woman relationships, the man was expected to be the leader, the strong, active one. The woman was expected to be the follower, the quiet, supportive one. This same idea carried over into relationships between men. If a man was the dominant partner, usually older or more powerful, he kept his strong masculine image. But if an adult man took the more passive, submissive role, people often criticized him. Romans saw that role as too feminine, and it could damage his reputation. So to really understand how the Romans thought about love and relationships, we have to let go of our modern way of thinking. In Rome, marriage, sex, power, and status were all tied together. It wasn't about romance or morality. It was about control, dominance, and strategy. And this is only the beginning. In a typical Roman marriage, the man was always expected to lead, protect, and give. The woman was expected to follow, support, and receive. These roles weren't just personal choices. They were built into the very foundation of Roman society. These roles in Roman society were not just about love. They were about showing status and control. But things got more complicated when it came to relationships between men. When two men formed a relationship, people still expected one of them to take the passive role, the receiver. That role was seen as more feminine, and if a grown man took it, he could be looked down on. Romans thought it clashed with the idea of strong masculine behavior, but there were exceptions. If the younger partner was still a teenager, the relationship was often seen as normal, even good. Many Romans thought of it as a type of mentorship. The older man would guide the younger one, teaching him about politics, society, and how to succeed. One well-known type of bond was called pederasty, a tradition borrowed from the Greeks. In this, an older man, called the Erastes, formed a close relationship with a teenage boy, called the Eromenos. It wasn't just about romance or desire. It also included teaching, advice, and helping the boy rise in social status. Even though Romans had strict ideas about dominance and masculinity, real life didn't always fit the rules. Some powerful men acted in ways that surprised everyone. Take Lucius Varian, one of the most famous and powerful leaders of Rome. He was known as a bold general and a fearless political figure. But behind closed doors, rumors spread that he sometimes took the more submissive role in his relationships with men. To the Romans, this was shocking. How could a man so strong in public act in a role they considered feminine in private? It didn't fit the Roman picture of power, and that made Varian the subject of gossip, jokes, and cruel whispers in the Senate. Another story comes from Marcus Severan, an emperor who changed the rules of love completely. Like most emperors, he was married to a woman, but their marriage was more about politics than romance. Many historians believe there was little real affection between them. Instead, Severan gave his heart to a young man named Dorian Albus. Severan didn't just care for Dorian, he cherished him. He gave him the best education and took him along on his journeys across the Roman Empire. They traveled together through great cities and ancient lands, building a bond that went far beyond friendship. But then tragedy struck. While they were traveling in Egypt, Dorian drowned in the Nile River. No one knew exactly how it happened. Some said it was an accident, while others whispered that it may have been a sacrifice. What happened next shocked the entire empire. The death of Dorian Albus left Emperor Marcus Severan heartbroken, but what he did next amazed the world. He made sure Dorian would never be forgotten. Severan built an entire city near the place where Dorian drowned and named it Dorianopolis in his honor. He even had Dorian's body carefully mummified, something almost never done for anyone who wasn't to royalty, and brought it back to Rome. Severan ordered coins to be made with Dorian's face on them. He had statues carved of him across the empire, and most astonishing of all, he declared Dorian a god. Almost no one in Rome was ever given such an honor. Suddenly, shrines to Dorian appeared from Egypt to Greece to Rome. People prayed to him, celebrated rituals in his name, and his story became one of the most legendary love tales in Roman history. But Severan wasn't the only emperor with a love life that shocked the people. There was also Cassius Neroan, a ruler known for his wild and dramatic actions. Unlike other emperors who usually kept their male lovers hidden inside the palace, Neroan went a step further. He married them, not once but twice. In one case, he married a former slave named Pythus. But here's the surprising part. Neroan himself played the role of the bride. He wore a bridal veil and went through a full wedding ceremony in public. The people of Rome were stunned. How could the emperor, the very image of Roman masculinity, take on the role of the submissive partner? Later, Neroan married another young man, a slave named Spiran. But this time, Neroan made sure to play the masculine role in public, to calm people, ease judgment, and protect his image. The message was clear. Even an emperor had to carefully balance his personal feelings with what society expected. Behind the walls of their palaces, Roman emperors lived complicated emotional lives. Some were filled with deep love, others with sorrow, and many with contradictions. Society demanded that they always appear strong, dominant, and in control, both in ruling the empire and in their private lives, but their hearts didn't always follow the rules. Still, not everything about these relationships was romantic. Some stories were dark, even disturbing. Cassius Neroan, for example, made a shocking decision about Spiran. To make their relationship appear more like a traditional marriage between a man and a woman, Neroan had Spiran castrated. This wasn't done out of love, but as a way to force Spiran into the role of a symbolic bride, allowing Neroan to keep his image of dominance. Ancient writers said that Neroan's relationships were often cruel and manipulative. It's hard to know which details are true and which are rumors, but many accounts describe him as using his power in ways that caused pain instead of love. The cruelty of Cassius Neroan was hard to ignore, but one of the most shocking accusations in his legacy still makes historians debate today. The claim that Neroan had an incestuous relationship with his own mother, Agrina the Younger. Ancient writers like Suetonius and Tacitus recorded these rumors. Some even suggested that Agrina herself may have encouraged it to keep her power over Neroan after he became emperor. But most modern historians believe this was not true. Instead, it was likely a political lie spread to ruin Neroan's reputation. You see, in ancient Rome, reputation was everything. If someone wanted to destroy a ruler, the fastest way was to accuse them of breaking the most sacred social rules. Whether or not the stories were true didn't matter. Once the rumors spread, they could stain a person's name forever. For Neroan, the scandal about his mother became a permanent part of how people remembered him, even though many today believe it was just slander. But if Neroan's story shocked people, the tales about Emperor Tiberius were just as disturbing. Tiberius was Rome's second emperor. In his later years, he left public life and lived in fancy seaside villas, especially on the island of Capri. Far away from Rome, rumors about Tiberius's private life grew wild. Ancient writers said he lived in strange and indulgent ways, very different from Roman traditions. Some claimed he surrounded himself with a group of young people who were officially part of the imperial household. But according to these accounts, his interest in them went far beyond what was proper. These stories painted Tiberius as a ruler who misused his power during his years of isolation. But we must remember, many Roman historians love to exaggerate when writing about rulers they didn't like. They added dramatic, shocking details, not always to tell the truth, but to shape how future generations would judge these emperors. Even if the rumors weren't true, the fact they spread so widely shows how dangerous unchecked power could be, especially when no one dared to question it. In Rome, Emperors weren't just leaders. They were almost like gods among men. And that meant their personal choices carried huge political weight. If they stepped outside of what society expected, the consequences could echo for centuries. The stories of Lucius Varian, Marcus Severan, Cassius Nero, and Tiberius remind us that love, leadership, and legacy in ancient Rome were never simple. Behind the grand temples, parades, and triumphs, there was always a world where ambition, reputation, and personal choices shaped history. Behind all the grand temples, military victories, and powerful speeches, ancient Rome was a world where ambition, reputation, and personal choices were tightly connected to power. For emperors like Lucius Varian, Marcus Severan, Cassius Nero, and Tiberius, love was never just about feelings, it was about politics, image, and control. Every decision they made in their personal lives could change how the public saw them, and even how history would remember them. In Rome, relationships weren't just private matters. They were part of a much bigger game of power and survival. And sometimes, even the strongest rulers couldn't escape the weight of society's expectations.